Hi, my name is Kristen and I'm your host for Icons of Naples, this series where we honor our Naples community heroes, our movers, shakers, and history makers who helped make our community the place we love to call home. Hi, and welcome back. Today, we are super honored to be speaking with Garrett Anthony. He is the spokesperson for the Anthony family. Now, what a lot of people don't know, if you know any of the Anthonys in town, the history of the Anthony family. They were among the first Black families to settle in Naples, arriving in 1953, a little before my time in Naples. So I'm excited to hear about these stories. So, Garrett, thank you so much for joining us today. You're a little young to be being, in my opinion, the spokesperson for the Anthony family. This is quite the honor. So you've been given this information and passed down.
Yeah, and really that's just keeping the legacy alive, being it passed down from generation to generation. So really just spending time and of course for us being a close-knit family, we've been able to have those conversations together and keep those relationships alive. So, I feel well equipped by everything that's been told to me.
Well, you came highly recommended and you were called the family spokesperson.
Yeah.
You are the next generation.
Yeah, appreciate that. High praise. So,
This is exciting. So can you share what originally brought, I guess it would be your grandparents?
My great-grandparents.
Great-grandparents.
Yeah.
So we have Elsie and Daisy Mae Anthony, and they came from Alabama in 53.
Yeah, so really, we call them, Big Daddy and Big Ma. So for my Big Daddy, Big Ma, what really led them, they were in an area where sharecropping was really the way of life. But unfortunately, with sharecropping, they really didn't see a way for them to get ahead in life and really to give their children the best opportunity to make it as adults. In the deep South for Black families, where if they had to sharecrop, a lot of families, they took their kids out of school. And so they really didn't have a chance to really finish education. And that was a big thing with my great grandfather. So he heard about Naples. It was a sleepy fishing village at the time, but there was a lot of opportunity as far as work. People were very honest in the wages that they gave. And so he came down and he found a place to work and he sent for his family, my great grandmother and my grandparent and my aunts and uncles. So everybody was able to move down, and that was in 53. And thankfully for, his value on education and family, they were able to finish high school. All of them had that opportunity that he and his wife didn't have at the time. So that was a big move for them.
That's an interesting take on it, because I don't think people think back then it wasn't just about the cultural part, Black, white, or anything like that. For a lot of people, it was about education. And if you had to take, and farmers went through this too.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a working farm, your kids had to work on the farm. That's it. It didn't matter the color of your skin.
Right.
And so if you wanted something different for your children, you had to find a way to be able to get them into education.
Right. And that was a big thing for him too, was like you said, the cultural aspect. Naples, even though it was in the South, it wasn't really influenced by a lot of the systemic things in the South. So like we mentioned, you can work and get an honest wage here. And a lot of times, yes, you had like a Black community, you had areas where white people lived, but everybody mingled together and kids were able to play together in the areas. So that was another thing that they were also seeing as a big opportunity. So it wasn't just the economic things, but cultural. So they really fell into a good melting pot here.
Yeah. That's what I heard back then.
Yeah, big melting pot. And also, a lot of people that migrated here, they came with the same core values. So hardworking, blue collar, integrity, honesty. And so that's really where the Anthony family, my family, really was able to settle in very well with a lot of people. And a lot of people knew them just because of that hard work and that ethic that they had.
I think the community was so small back then too. You had to rely on your neighbor or your coworker on those days where, a storm came through or something happened, like Donna or, those kind of things.
Right.
It didn't matter where you lived in town. It was like, okay, what are we fixing? What tree are we removing?
Exactly.
So we can get back to our way of life.
Right. And that's why for my family, they really looked at service oriented jobs. Like my great grandfather, he worked as at a golf course, a hole in wall golf course here,
Oh my gosh.
so worked here for many, many years. And then my great grandmother, she worked as a nurse. So she was able to work, with people and that just being able to serve the community. They got to, meet people of all different walks of life. And that's how that name kind of spread throughout the area. And people got to know them that way.
And that they did, because when I mentioned some of your family members to other people that you're coming on today, they're like, "Oh, I know them. Oh my gosh," And it's definitely a very well respected family too.
Right, right.
So do you know any of their earliest experiences here? Any family stories or neighbors in the community that you can say we live next door to, or any?
Yeah, they were able to work downtown, like in the Aqua Lane Shores area
Mm,
and like the Port Royal area, but they were really in the McDonald's quarters where a lot of the black families lived.
mhm,
And then thankfully, because of there was a family that was able to see the value of owning houses and land in the area. So even though the black families weren't able to move close to the beach, they had the River Park area. And that's
mm,
where they were able to now move over and they were able to buy houses like on
right.
Fifth Avenue North and 14th Street and those areas. So so again, they were able to work really closely with a lot of the families that were here for a long time, the Goodlets and the Franks and all of them, and again, just to be able to be recognized that way.
It's funny when you mention the name, because I
Mhm.
lived next door to Mr. Frank Whiteman
Yeah.
when I was a
Hmm.
child, and I was like, this is a long name for this street, and it
Yeah.
was called Frank White Man, and I'm like, and then I realized afterward, when I got a little bit older, and I'm like, wait, that's our neighbor, and my mom's like, yeah, the street's named after him, and then he
Right.
had houses along the street that he had bought over the years as rental properties, and people would visit or stay or live in, and then eventually when he passed away they sold. But
Right.
it's funny because when you go, his house is still there, and a lot of those little 2 bedroom 1 baths with the carport
Right. Right.
that was all
Yeah.
built in the 70s or 60s are
Yeah.
still there. And my mom's house was built in 1953.
Wow.
And
See.
yeah, so
Yeah.
so when you say that, I'm like, oh, that's so funny, I know that Frank name.
Yeah. See. So it's out there. So.
And the Goodlet name. But that's why we wanted to do this podcast, is because the grandchildren maybe aren't living here anymore. So we've lost some of those stories.
Yeah. The
That's what makes
connections.
this even more exciting.
Exactly. Yes. I agree.
Um, so growing up, it seems like your family was very involved in the Naples community. What would you say that were there particular traditions or values or principles that you remember your grandparents or being passed down from your great grandparents emphasizing um, here and living here?
Well, I would say from my great grandmother, Big Ma, she was really big on spiritual growth and really big on biblical principles. So, like love thy neighbor was a big thing,
Yeah.
right? And being of service to others, and it didn't have to be in some big grandiose way. It was just really a lot of them as the kids grew up and they became adults, they found ways to just find themselves of service to others. Some went into the military. Like my grandfather, he was a tradesman, but he worked with different people in his neighborhood. Yeah, he worked on their electrical. It just tried to find ways to do for others. My uncle Orzi, he was the first black fireman, and so just being a paramedic and a firefighter, that was something that fulfilled that need of service. So really, everyone, whether it was in education, like my auntie Doris, my auntie Brenda, they went into education. They were in the school system with elementary schools. So that was their path. And even my sister now, who's a great granddaughter of Mr. LC, she's a teacher. So, those core values of just really trying to find ways to better the community, but do for others in the community. That was pretty much the bedrock that everybody kind of leaned upon.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
that's incredible, because I think in some of this newer generation, again, why I find this Icons of Naples and just in general anything to do with history like this is so important, because you get to reach back and say what was important.
Right.
And I think also post COVID, we're
Hmm.
getting more people looking for maybe a simpler way. I mean, don't get me wrong, logos aren't going anywhere,
Hmm.
but
You're right.
as we sit in a beautiful showroom here, but I think people are looking for a way to merge the I like nice things, but I also want a simpler way of life, or I want a more traditional way of life that has more substance and value to it rather than just what are we doing Friday night?
Right,
I
right.
think we've kind of gotten away from that, or at least where I see, I know I'm a little bit older.
Hmm.
I see a little bit of a trend towards, I mean, I know people now who 15 years ago weren't going to church
Right.
and now they are. How do you, now being a younger generation, what do you see?
Yeah, I see where people are kind of compartmentalizing. There's a lot of subdivisions. There's a lot of gated communities. So you're kind of losing
Mm,
that community aspect. And this is where, for me, it stands out that you can still have a sense of community just by being around people and finding ways to impact people's lives, just in little ways. And so again, you can do it through teaching, or you can do it through whatever job that you may have. Just being able to build relationships with those around you, and then one turns to two, turns to four, turns to eight, and eventually it just grows to where people are able to remember you not by what you did, but really by how you treated them. So I think that's where Naples is trying, kind of trended away from that small town feel,
mm.
and now it's kind of a destination location where people come, they come to retire, but then people are often kind of in their own cubby holes. I think it's important for us to get out and have those relationships with people, and that way, like, even for younger people, to be able to connect more instead of it being online and things like that.
Yeah, I see. It's almost like even if you're in just your community, like you can still make something of it. You can make a community within your community, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right, right.
Because I know we all miss Naples being the small community. And I was talking to Lois Bolin earlier on the earlier
Mhm.
podcast,
Right.
and we're the largest um, by square miles community or county in Florida.
Mhm.
And so growth is inevitable.
Right.
So we have to find ways to stay connected. And when you come up with in your family
Mhm.
that connection and service to others, even if it's, your neighbor,
Mhm.
that's so important to keep that community feel, even though Naples is just growing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is that you can always recreate, connections. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be those that came, the pioneers, they were the foundation. But as new people come into the area, you get to make new friendships and new relationships and things. Even though there's change, you can always recreate it. So I think that's important to just keep that to the forefront. And like I said, it's easier to just kind of, draw back and just say, okay, this is my family, this is our little bubble. But just to be able to kind of get out and still mingle, that you don't have to, like I said, do it in big ways. You do it in little ways, and eventually it'll grow over time.
The
And
compound theory.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that theory because it's
Yeah.
it's true once you put it into action,
Right,
for
right.
sure. Um,
Yeah.
so the River Park neighborhood, you mentioned it earlier. It was pretty central to your family stories. What memories from life in that community does your family talk about? Like when they say, "Oh, when we lived here, this is what happened."
Yeah, it was really, my big daddy and big mom, when they had their home there. That was big for them because it was always, a fun time. They had fun stories, and it was a small community, so the travel
Yeah.
was, everybody was right next to each other, and so they were able to go to my big mom's house and go fishing. They get mangoes off the trees. Stay there on Friday nights, eat chili dogs, homemade chili dogs. So it was nice that proximity where everything was right there. They can go, across the street or across the Goodlet Road. They had the pool that was right there. So it was just a lot for them to really be together as a family, as cousins growing up. For my dad's generation, that was
Hmm.
there. And then, it was good that from the McDonald's quarters, they were able to all buy homes in the area. And so even as they got to be adults, they didn't have to feel like, okay, I have to move off to establish a new life. They were all right there in that River Park area, so they were able to stay close.
That's a nice story.
Yeah.
I'm Italian and we all live on the same street, so I get it.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
We'll get it into the news. Well, next question, which is the creation of Anthony Court.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't know why it's named that. So tell us how Anthony Court came about and the the perspective and feeling, because you had River Park, but there are some people who left.
Yeah, exactly. So what it was, again, my grandfather, again, the core value, family and education. So he was really big on family. And even though his kids had gotten older and they kind of had their own homes, some were living in the Gordon River apartments, some lived on 14th Street in River Park in their own homes. He was always big on all of them remaining together in the same area. And he was real big on being able to save money, and he was really smart about that. And so he was able to allocate so much when he got to the point where he could start buying land and had that much capital. He was able to buy land in North Naples. Now, back in those days, we used to call it the country because it was like in the boonies. Naples used to stop at Pine Ridge. That was like the northern border almost. So to buy north of that, it was out there, but there was just a small road. There was 6 acres that somebody owned, and he talked to the guy and said, "Hey, I'll be willing to buy all 6." The guy sold it to him, and he was able to do that as a gift, to all of his kids that were still living at the time. And so, he gave a parcel, an acre of land, and it was beautiful that he gave it to them with no strings attached.
Mhm.
Some decided to build out there, like my Uncle Orzi. He was the first one to move out there, built a beautiful home. My Auntie Doris moved out there soon after. My Uncle Paul moved out there and built a house. For instance, like my grandfather, he already had bought a home in River Park,
Mm.
and he had really strong ties to the community there. So, but he kept it, and that was still an asset that he can still use today. So, that was beautiful that he was giving it as a gift. And there were some other families that kind of led the charge, because there were some other families that moved out there, but they didn't really do it in the same way. Some moved out there and they built themselves. But for him, to the fact that he said, "I'm going to buy these 6 acres of land and give it to my children," and he stayed in River Park, that was huge there.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I read about that and I was like,
Hmm.
wow, that's first off being, how my family lives. It was
Hmm.
my grandfather had done the same thing. He built his house, and back then it was considered, "Oh, Paul, you bought all the way out there. Why didn't you buy over here?" And he's like, "I've already lived over there. I want to live over here.
Right.
And I know I'll always have my family around me." And even when he first bought it, he subdivided it,
Yeah.
knowing, okay, when he bought it, he already had his children. And he's like, and he was a builder too. So for him, it was like, and we'll build on it.
Yeah.
So I can see that sense of family and the close tie of that, how important it is.
Yeah, and I think too, just coming from just a rural area like in Alabama, where that is pretty much what you do. You have land and
Yeah.
you kind of gift it, and so when he finally got that opportunity, the ability to do that, he saw and said, "Okay, everybody's able to stay together," which it was a beautiful thing, because then my Uncle Orzi went down to the city and said, "Hey," or to the county and said, "Hey, all my family is going to be living here at some point, or that's the objective. So name it Anthony Court." And so people lived there, and it became a legacy thing for us growing up, where we had family reunions. Every year, that was like a touchstone for us to always go there and just really reflect. And it was cool for me growing up as a kid in the area where we could go, and I would go to my Auntie Doris, and then my uncle could walk right over, and just the proximity, and then the amount of space. Like, for instance, where my grandparents live, they were in a tight knit community, but the space was a little
Mm.
more congested in the area, which is not a bad thing, but just the fact that they had a lot of autonomy. They were out there and they were on their own in their own little area, which is big. So, just the fact that he gave them that privilege and that luxury was a
Mm.
big thing
No,
for us.
that's huge. That's
Hmm.
huge. So what would you say with everyone living close? Because I know what my family's is. What would you say with everybody living close? I know you have the support and the sense of community and family. What would you say the biggest challenges were?
I think it was probably challenges. I would say probably just you kind of want to have your sense of your own sometimes. And like, for instance, my Auntie Rosemary, we call her Auntie Sis, she kind of was saying, "You know what, I want to have my own space." And so she did on Fifth Avenue, which was actually a few doors down from where my uncle, or from where my grandfather lived. But I think that part of it, sometimes people want to have their own,
Mm.
sense of self and have their own area. And so I think that was probably where like half of the family moved out there, half
Mm.
stayed in River Park, which was good. Again, it allowed for people to kind of spread out and had a home base where they wanted to go if they
Right.
wanted to. But then sometimes it's like, okay, if I want to stay to myself or kind of do my own thing,
Right.
you kind of have that too as well.
No,
So
I understand that. My mom doesn't live on the street.
yeah, so you
She
can
lives down the
identify.
street, like a good 10 minutes away, but it's great.
Yeah,
She's like, no, it's great. I love living over here. I'm
right.
like, you don't want to live on the street? No, we're good.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, mom. So I get that. Now, you had an uncle,
hmm
Charles C. Anthony.
Chelsea and
Yeah,
yeah, right.
that's important. Um, he was in the Vietnam War,
Right,
and lost his life in the war at 23.
right.
So there's a story behind a park that was named after him. And I heard the story from your uncle.
Right.
So tell the listeners and the viewers,
hmm
tell us how that park came about and the naming situation all those years.
Yeah, so it was a beautiful thing after his passing. So of course, he was someone who grew up in the River Park area. The family was well respected, well known, and then because of the area and a lot of the black families that were there, there was just a park that was made and it didn't have a name. It was just a playground for a lot of the residents in the area. After my uncle had passed away, it was really a heavy blow to the city of Naples as a whole, not just in the black community, but just a native son, regardless of color, someone who grew up and was raised in Naples, and to lose his life as tragically as that, and especially doing it in service to his country. So someone had written into the letter to the editor, and they had said, well, hey, you know what? This would be a beautiful token to the Anthony family to have it named in honor of this fallen soldier, this person that grew up in our area. It got to City Hall, and they said, what better way to honor his legacy than to, put that park in his name. So that's where they were able to dedicate it as Anthony Park. Now, the way that it got to Charlie C. Anthony, my grandfather, Willie Anthony, he lived in the area, and he was really vocal about just doing what was right for that area. It was very small. It was only 3 streets for the houses, and then we had one main area for the apartments. And so a lot of times it often got overlooked, unfortunately. So he was there just to speak out for what was right. Hey, we're homeowners, we pay taxes too. Let's allow some of that to be allocated towards our area. So because he was so vocal and he took that leadership role, he didn't want to be seen as a leader, so to speak, but just to take the lead and trying to help. People started conflating the Anthony Park with him. And so he was like, no, if this is for my brother, this needs to be in his honor for his name. And so he spoke up about it for many, many decades. Listen, this needs to be Charlie C. Anthony. This doesn't need to be tied. We thank you that it has our family name, but it really needs to be appropriately allocated towards that. And so finally in 2016 or so, after persistence and patience and being able to talk to people, he was able to talk to a city manager, and they finally put the Charlie C. Anthony name on it and was able to put a plaque. So now it's being recognized in the right way for,
right, because the name is it's a name. It's
Right.
his name.
Right.
And I remember when I heard that story, I was like, you mean it's been named not wrong, just not
Accurately, right.
for so many years, but perseverance.
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes you have to do that with government entities.
Yeah, right.
So now, what do you feel that, because it's gone through, like everything else that's managed by a government entity, it's ebbed and flowed in its maintenance and neglect and renewal. And I think all the parks did at one point. I know there were several that went through this. I remember reading about it when I was younger. What do you think it's meant to not only your family, but the greater Naples community to have that honor and have a park named like that?
Yeah, I think it's important because, again, we had discussed earlier, it's about, preserving the heritage that's here in Naples. And not only is it for a family member that maybe they donated some money, but this is for someone who gave their life. So it's a double standard or a double thing that should be on there. I think too, it's important that the upkeep of it matches the honor that's supposed to be given and the respect for the person. And I think also too, it should be on par with the other parks in the area.
100%.
The Fleshmans and the Lotto Milks and the Cambiers, the Bakers. For a long time, because it was nestled so far back in that community, Many people outside of the community didn't use it, and so because of that, many people saw why upkeep it. It's just for that
And out
small
of sight, out of
area.
mind, I think has a little bit to do with it. There's nobody to
Exactly.
complain that week about, wait, I went, because Fleshman did that. It would be, but it's so used. It's used all the time.
Right, right. And it's
Yeah.
like you just mentioned, it's on a main thoroughfare right there on Goodlip, right by the zoo. So, it's like you said, it's more of attention that's being brought to it. But now I think that, when the right eyes got on it, 10 years
Mm.
ago, and it got rededicated, and then,
Yeah.
the mayor was able to get involved, and she did a proclamation about the
Yeah.
park. Now, like I said, I think it's been brought to the same standard as the other parks. And so it's really just a beautiful thing. It's golf access, and
Isn't
then I
that
think
great?
there's a lot of other things that they're planning on doing with it. So I'm excited to see what's going to be coming in the future for it
It's
too.
it's it's a great spot.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure there's a developer that would really love that spot, but it's a park.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. Right.
It belongs to the city. So no, it's
Yeah.
not happening. Um, Now, you had mentioned that there are some family members who moved to Anthony Court. There's some that stayed in River Park. But in my conversation with your family this week, there's some who've also moved.
Hmm.
Um, what do you think the catalyst was, or in Naples as in general? I think this is happening as a whole to families.
Right. Right.
Um, why do you think there's a choice to leave Naples? Do you think it's work? Do you think it's, just time to move on? What are your feelings on that? Because I know through the course of this podcast, I'm going to talk to people about it because there's been change.
Yeah,
So when
definitely.
people leave Naples and people in your family left, what do you think?
I think it's the same word that brought my family here in the first place. It's opportunity.
Mm,
I think that as Naples went through its phases, it had its early phase where it was very big, a lot that could be done for young families. People were attracted; they came here. Eventually, the next generation, there was room for expansion, and financially, it was feasible for people to
mm,
settle and still stay close to home. But eventually, you get to kind of a cap space when it comes to the expansion area,
yeah.
and then I think too, Naples was kind of nestled in an area where it was often overlooked by the Miamis and Tampas and other areas. Now people are starting to find out this is a beautiful area. It's very safe, right? So then where there's high demand,
Yeah.
the cost of living goes up. And so for a lot of my family, we wanted to stay here, right? A lot of them wanted to stay and still stay where their roots are. And I still think that Naples is always going to be home base for us, regardless if we move, get married and move off or what have you. I think Naples will always be that home base for us. But sometimes when again, opportunity, some moved here, and I think Naples served its purpose for us. And then it may just be better to move off and find other opportunities in the state or in the nation. But like I said, I think Naples, just the core of it, just
Mhm.
where it is, we always come back, and that's why we always find fit to, keep the limelight on, Anthony Court, Anthony Park, these other things where we always want to touch base on.
It'll always be home.
Yeah, exactly,
It'll always be home. Yeah.
exactly.
Um, What's your perspective on Naples growing into this international community? And how do you feel like that growth has affected the Black community? Because it
I
comes up a lot lately. So,
Yeah, I would say, as far as the personal connections, the Black community is kind of dissolving in a way, because you have the core people who were there, that generation. Like we mentioned, now with the younger generation, they're starting to move off. So as the older generation, they're passing on, or a lot of them are moving on. Again, it's just a change of the guards. People are moving into
yeah.
the area. I would say for my family, and this is just my personal perspective, I think it's a positive in a way because we own the land where we live. It wasn't like we were forced out of our areas, like in certain parts of the nation where you'd have somebody move in, they beautify the area, property values go up, and then people can't afford, so they are moving out
Yeah.
not on their terms.
Mhm.
Whereas, like for instance, Anthony Court, my auntie Doris, her family, they saw it fit. They had their house there for 50 years, and they had the ability to say, well, do we stay? Do we renovate? Do we move? And
Mhm.
so they decided to move, and it was on their terms. So it was nice a few years ago. They kind of came together. They brought the family together. Said, we're gonna have one last Thanksgiving together. Everybody come out. We do it the right way, and eventually they move on. And so it was, a bittersweet moment, but again, it was done the right way. So now new, people are coming in, and I think that's why now it's important for at least the stories to be captured. So for new people that come in, they can kind of still be connected with the people that were here and what shaped, the growth of
Yeah.
Naples
And
early on.
I think you really touched on it when they come into an area. If they do too much, it pushes out the previous generation. My daughter lives in DC, and we've had this conversation because her
Yeah.
friend lives in Navy Yard,
Mm-hmm.
and I only know Navy Yard from when she moved into DC. I didn't know what Navy Yard was before, and
Right.
she says, "Oh no, mom, it was this, this, and this, and it looked like this, and this is all the stuff they did." And I'm like, "Oh." And I get we want big, beautiful, nice things, and that's where we are in a generation. And you do have to change things, especially when they're no longer upright or ability to stand on their own.
Right.
You have to make that change building wise. But I think you said it perfectly that your family, whenever somebody decides to move away, they've done it for their own reasons. It's not
Right.
because it was gentrified or changed in a way that we can't stay. And I
Exactly.
see it with the storms. That was another thing. The
Right.
hurricanes. I saw, growing up here since 78, I saw a lot of those houses along like Creighton and stuff. Now back then, they were like 300,000, maybe 250, 270 but that was a lot of money back then.
Mm-hmm.
But some
True.
of those people were still there before Ian, and they just couldn't afford to stay
Yeah.
and fix it because either their age or insurance or whatever. But it will completely change a neighborhood, even though it wasn't the intention to beautify it or change it away from the old. It was just a storm.
Yeah. And I think a big thing is the identity of an area
Mm.
where even though you may have residents that are new, as long as the core identity of that area stays intact, it doesn't have to look the same, but as long as, again, the names are the same, or at least people understand and they can have an appreciation for who was there and why these things are this way. So that's why, like, the park is a big thing. It had Anthony Park, but there was no real identifying marks of why it was Anthony
Mm.
Park. And so, some people could say, well, why have Anthony Park? Well, nobody's really using it. Let's tear it down and let's,
Right.
put condos on it. Now that there's identifying marks of why this is here, who is this for, the family that was behind it, the person behind it, now it gives impetus for people to want to preserve that area and keep that the same. So I think that's really where we saw a lot of changes. Like, for instance, the corner store that used to be on
Yeah.
Goodlet, and now it's a 7-Eleven. A lot of the identifying landmarks have been gone away. But like for my family, like I said, the park was a big thing, and that was a big push. Finally, it came to fruition. Anthony Court. I know a lot of that area is very high demand for a lot of growth in that area. But eventually, if they can preserve that name, keep that legacy there, that would be huge. Just keep that identifying.
I think you also touched
Mhm.
on something great in that is that if you don't have it not only named right, so people understand, like if you don't explain to people why this is here,
Right.
then why preserve it or why keep it? But if you explain to people and they're like, if they're big history buffs, for
Hmm.
example, they're gonna be like, oh no, guess what that's about?
Right.
And they're gonna share that story with the next person who comes in. And I like that there are places in Naples that have really honed in on preserving what they are.
Hmm.
And we were talking earlier about the bronze markers around town. I was so
Yeah.
happy to bring that up because most people don't know what those are. You
Yeah.
sound like you do.
Yeah, exactly. So
See,
I've heard of it. Yeah.
I didn't know when I was younger, but I
Hmm.
know now. But I think it's great that there's the walking maps and just little historical things that the buildings might have changed,
Hmm.
but what happened here or what was here is preserved.
Yeah, and I do want to touch on another thing that was interesting. So again, it was Anthony Park for a long time. There were no identifying marks, but then there was the Girl Scouts that used it for like a summer camp, used the little field house that was there, and the Girl Scouts were one of the early ones that helped kind of push the name change. My grandfather was always talking about it. fortunately fell on deaf ears, but the Girl Scouts said, hey, they were looking into the history and, hey, why are the names and where are the names coming from? And when they found out it was for a veteran, they were like, wow, this is way more than what we would have thought. So, I thought that was really interesting too, that they did the homework and they were willing to do the research on it. And now that there's a plaque up there, people don't have to do that research. It's all there. So again, I think that people want to know.
Yeah.
And, the Girl Scouts, that's a younger generation, younger than me, that wanted to reach out and kind of reach back and see where did all of this come from. And so there's always going to be somebody and someone that's going to have that appreciation for history,
Yes.
and we're going to want to bring that to the current times.
Yes, I didn't know about the Girl Scout thing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that
That's
was
good
that was
on
huge
them.
for us. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But it does. Sometimes people just ask a question and then it starts the ball rolling, and
Mhm.
or it triggers other people to say, "Oh yeah," and then the next person's like, "Oh right," and then you find out 5 people in the room knew about it, but they just didn't share, and then you create a
Right.
movement that way. So
Exactly.
much so.
Mhm.
Um, so what do you feel it means to you personally and to your family to be recognized as an Icons of Naples?
Yeah, I think for us, we appreciate it in the fact that, a lot of times icons are that word is often used for someone who has a front facing, or they're like a celebrity. I think for us, we're really just looking at the example that was set by my great grandparents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, just being able to do right for others. And eventually you'll be recognized, not in a way, and that wasn't their motivation of doing it. Like, for instance, my grandfather, he always would play the background. He always wanted to do things for others just for what was right.
Yeah.
And so eventually, that's an example for all of us as, the next generation, to just say, okay, we don't have to take a prominent role to make a difference in the community, then make a
Mhm.
difference in Naples. Just do right for other people, regardless of whatever motivations. Just do what's right. So I think that's now being recognized for that and for their hard work. It makes us feel good that they did things the right way. They had core values. They had principles that stood on those principles. Like my great grandmother. The fifth commandment in the Bible, where it talks about honor their father and their mother. Things will go well for you. So the fact that they were able to honor their parents and have, core values as a family, staying together, those things are being recognized now, and that's great, for us.
No, I'm excited that we're able to do this today because I know so many people don't know about the Anthony story.
Right.
And then
Hmm.
the fact that it's so rooted in community and the value system that I think people are looking towards a little bit more now
Yeah.
to see now how can we have that? They want that sense of community, they want that sense of family and the compound effect. It doesn't have to
Hmm.
be big. You can start small, help the neighbor,
Yeah. Exactly.
mow the lawn for the older person. And the
Right.
next thing you know, you've got 3 other people saying, "Oh, thank you. Oh, that was great." Or, "Oh, how can I help?"
Right, right. And I agree with that. And I think too, like for instance, with my grandfather, he spoke up for his residents. Like, for instance, he had, an acre of land that was gifted by my great grandfather. He wanted to move, but the reason why he stayed at River Park, he said, well, if I move, who else is going to be able to speak up? Who else is going to be the one to speak out and try to look after this area? Because it's only 3 streets and a couple apartment buildings compared to Aqualane Shores, or compared to the moorings or Lake Park. So, he felt a sense of duty,
Yeah.
but he didn't do it for any type of recognition. And so that was a good example for me to say, okay, and for really all my cousins and my sister to say, okay, you do things for the right reasons, and people will recognize you, and they'll
Yeah.
be able to remember you for that. And I think for us now in the community, we don't have to take a role in politics, or we don't have to be a big business owner, be a benevolent person with a lot of money. You can always look out for the next person next door, always look for opportunities to be able to help, and just do, like I said, do what's right. If you see something, say something. And I will say one other thing, that my grandfather, he took time to build personal relationships with people that could make changes. So sometimes when it comes to like monies that come in for the city, the books are public records, but people don't know or they don't have that time to do it. He was a voracious reader. So, like we talked about earlier, education. He may not have been formally educated. He didn't go to college and get a certificate that marked that he was educated, but he informed himself on what was the right information. And then he would just present that. He would go to the board and say, hey, this book says that this much is being allocated towards this area. We're not seeing any fruitages of it. He would talk to the people in the community, and not in a way to try to find out what was wrong, but he would just have those communications, those conversations, and people would say, hey, these people are riding up and down the street, they're speed racing down here. Okay, we need to get some type of speed bumps. He'd go and speak. They get speed bumps. Okay, it's dark at night and people are coming home and they don't feel safe. He'd go down and talk, hey, there's so much that could be allocated for this. And we need street lights. They get street lights. So it was like, okay, he didn't have to have like an emotional attachment. He didn't have to have an agenda behind it. He just wanted to do what was right, and he was able to speak out.
I look at him as your grandfather as a caretaker of the community, or I don't want to say gatekeeper, but a caretaker of the community, of just making sure we get taken care of as a community.
Right.
Which my final question was, if you look back, what do you hope that your family, they remember about your family's contributions? And that was, wow.
Yeah.
I'm thinking first of your grandfather and caretaking his river park.
Yeah, I would say, looking at the contributions, we said it time and time again. I think we're always looking at, how do we want to be remembered on how we treat people? My grandfather, he always looked at how he treated people within the community. And like you said, looked after people. My Uncle Ozzy, we call him Orzy, my Uncle Ozzy. He was someone that he went into the Navy. He was a firefighter. So everybody was always looking at how they treated others and looking for jobs that allowed them to do that. And so I think that's pretty much going to be the legacy that we hope to be able to carry on. Is, okay, yes, Naples has grown, Naples has changed, it's gone through phases, the cultural shift that's been here. And a lot of times we may feel like, okay, well, if I don't have a personal connection with my next door neighbor, then I don't feel the need to move forward and want to do for that person because I don't know them. Doesn't matter if we know them or if we have, it's all about showing personal interest to the next person. So I think that's really, and then also, with my uncle, having a park named after him because he gave his sacrifice. Again, I think it all just rolls into the same, regardless where we go, just what type of impact are we leaving on people. And that's how we're going to be remembered.
I agree. I think that it will absolutely be the case with your family to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Garrett, I want to thank you for coming on today and being part of our programming. Your family has such a legacy here, and I love the sense of community and caretaking.
Yeah.
That your grandfather, that's just incredible that he, what he's done for his neighborhood and his community and passed on for generations. And then, of course, your uncle's sacrifice and the park. I have to go back down there. I haven't been down there in a little while. And the involvement in the leadership. So I want to thank you again for coming on our show today.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to just really be able to share it. And, like I said, I think what you're doing is a huge, service for the community. Again, a lot of these things could easily, fall by the wayside with time. So, the fact that you're taking the opportunity to really capture these things, it really means a lot to all of us who's natives here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And we all appreciate that here from Icons of Naples.
Yeah.
So that wraps up today, and we will see you on the next episode of Icons of Naples. Thank you for joining us today on Icons of Naples. I hope you enjoyed learning about our history on this series. And a special thank you to Ferrari of Naples for allowing us to use this amazing space. And a special thank you to our series sponsor, Robert of Philadelphia. To find all of our episodes on Icons, be sure to check out your favorite podcast platform, or you can also find us on YouTube. Remember to subscribe and follow to keep up to date on all the latest episodes. And don't forget to share. See you again on the next Icons of Naples.